we got Thomas Blackshear on the Art Dealer Diaries. I'm a little more relaxed than maybe some of the other podcasts you've done. I enjoy getting to know the person and just trying to figure out how in the world you ended up being who you are, which is a really interesting road because I know some of the things about you, but I honestly will say, without even interviewing you yet, I think you're going to probably be one of my most interesting guests I've had.
Oh, well, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, right. No pressure there, brother. Right.
Uh,
But you've had this just crazy kind of life. And I want to kind of delve into finding out how you got there. Now you grew up in Atlanta, is that
yeah, I
Georgia?
grew up in Atlanta. My father was in the Air Force, and we moved around a little bit, but we ended up in Atlanta when I was around 8 or 9, I believe, and then I've been there ever since. So.
And so when you were growing up as a kid, did you have a big family?
No, it wasn't real big. I mean, two siblings. You know, my mom, dad, two siblings. That was it. So.
And were you interested in art at that time?
Oh, all my life. My mom told me that the first time they recognized I might have a talent was I drew a cow
Mm-hmm.
and it looked like a cow. Now, I just remember I started drawing when I was around 4 years old. I remember that, but other than that, I don't remember anything else about what I did and all that stuff.
And my guess is that you probably won contests and things in school and were recognized for those achievement for those abilities too, probably early on. Was that true?
Oh yeah, I was always the artist of the school kind of guy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's how, it's funny. Almost all artists that I have interviewed, not all, but I would say 90+% were the class artists
Yeah.
and recognizing that. And, for whatever that is, your students did, and your parents did too, right? So they were like very positive toward you being in the arts.
Well, unfortunately, my mom and dad divorced when I was around 11, I guess. And so, I mean, but my mom always let me do what I wanted to do. And so I always just wanted to do art. And I just kept growing and trying things and doing things. And I started getting into sculpting. I taught myself how to sculpt. Well, the gift is a gift from God, but I mean, when I was around 14, I started doing sculptures. I started making sculptures out of Play-Doh.
Hmm.
And I was so dumb about about ceramics and how all that worked. I thought after I made the characters in Play-Doh, I was supposed to put them in the oven and heat them up.
That seems reasonable to me. I think I may have done something like that too.
but
Do you
so
have
and
any of
then
those? Did any of those survive?
oh no. What happened was this: when we moved to Atlanta, um, I had the neighborhood. All the guys in the neighborhood did models. They did models of monsters. Now,
Mm.
most people do model airplanes, model cars, but these guys were into model monsters, and that was perfect for me. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So, I started doing the models too. And then uh, my models started looking better than everybody else's models. And then that's how I started learning how to paint models and stuff. And then after a while, when I got into high school, I started learning how to make my own models out of ceramics.
Mm.
And then from that point, I used to buy every kind of monster model or superhero model I could find and painted them. But after a certain time, after I had bought all of these things, I started making my own. And then from that point on, I never bought another model. So,
And so you would buy these kits, right? Is that what the
yeah,
model kits? Yeah. And then you go,
yeah.
I can do this. And that seems, I have a funny feeling that's a thematic of yours throughout your life is that you see something, you learn it, and you go, I can do that myself.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it is. And even there was times when I didn't know if I had never tried it, but I could just look at it and say I could do
Yeah.
that. And I mean, it was that way with, down the road. I eventually became Mark English's apprentice, but it was kind of like that with him too. So, but no, I've always, I don't know, I've just had confidence enough in myself to realize when I looked at something, I think I could figure that out.
Yeah.
And I would. So
Yeah, I see those traits in illustrators, and I represent so many illustrators in my, I say illustrators, but they're fine artists that did
yeah,
illustration.
yeah.
And like, and all of them, by the way, interestingly enough, maybe not interestingly enough, not surprisingly, really, they all talk highly of you. They all go, "Oh
Oh,
yeah, Thomas Blackshear. Oh yeah," whether it's Francis Livingston, Eric Bowman, Dennis Zeminski, they all are, I think, fans of your work and appreciate what you've been able to do.
well, that was really nice to hear. It's just that I don't know. It's kind of weird for me because I'm just here trying to get my work done.
That's
I'm
an
always in a
illustrator.
yeah. I'm just trying to get work done. I don't know who knows my stuff, who likes my stuff, whatever. I'm just trying to get stuff done. And so, when I hear stuff like that, it's always surprising and exciting to hear for me. So
Yeah, well, that's true. Your name comes up repetitively, which is always a good sign for. Yeah, I love when I hear that. Like, oh yeah, okay, all right. And that makes me want to pay attention, and I have, as you know, I've been paying attention to your work for a while now. So when you were in high school, when you finished up, you were right. I was right, kind of at the end of the Vietnam War, right? You were probably
yeah,
72, 73, right in there.
yeah. 73 is when I graduated.
Yeah. So was that affecting you at all and what was going on in your life? I mean,
Not,
you had to do the draft number thing, right?
mm, well, yeah, but that was yeah, I did do that, but yeah, not really. That didn't really have an impact on me so much. I did remember going down to the draft board. I think I forgot when all that happened now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I remember that. No, it was my main thing was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to be an artist. The
Yeah.
whole point was trying to decide what kind of artist are you going to be. And that was an easy choice because I knew I didn't want to be a starving artist. So I said, okay, I guess I'll try to be an illustrator then.
Hmm.
Not only that, when I would look at an illustrator's work, I always liked their work better sometimes than a lot of fine artists because I liked the skill level that they had. So that's when I decided I wanted to get into it.
And so,
Unfortunately for me, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Unfortunately for you, what?
Unfortunately for me, there weren't a lot of avenues in Atlanta. There was only one big art institute, which was at the Atlanta Art Museum, and I wasn't really interested in that, and so there wasn't a lot of choices. I found out about the big Chicago Institute of Art, and a counselor said, "Well, maybe you should consider this school in Chicago and stuff." And I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, let me try to do that." I thought it was very interesting the day before I left to go to Chicago. My art teacher had a friend come by. My art teacher, Curtis Patterson, who is a very well known sculptor in Atlanta now. But he had a friend that he knew who came by and he wanted me to meet this guy. So I came up to his house, met this guy, and this guy went to a school down the street from the Chicago Institute of Art called the American Academy of Art.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, I went to the American Academy of Art. And I said, yeah, well, I'm going to the Chicago Institute of Art. He said, yeah, I went to a school down the street from that. And he says, there's a friend of mine that I named Mike Desatnik, and I want you to look him up for me and just say hello. And I said, well, okay, sure, I'll do that. After going to the school at the Chicago Institute, after being there for a few months, I was very discouraged and disillusioned because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And it just wasn't the kind of school I wanted. They weren't real strict on really teaching you the disciplines to become a good artist. To me, they were more into your image of an artist and the impression of an artist, and they were real free and all that mess. I wanted some structure,
Right.
and I never will forget something that happened that I just thought was so kooky, but it was just the way the school was. And there one time there was this guy, and he had on roller skates, and he had on a scarf around his neck and a jacket. He had on pilot's cap and goggles, and he was roller skating down the hallway. And the dean of the school came out and saw him, and he went, "Oh, wonderful, wonderful." And I just said to myself, I got to get out of here. I mean, it was just a kooky place, man. So,
Do you think
and
having your dad being in the military was part of that, going, because I was in the military too. And I mean, there's a structure that does come from
uh-huh,
that. And
yeah,
you see yours, and you're looking for that, right? You're looking for that kind of structure. That
honest,
clearly it doesn't isn't structure.
not honestly, that wasn't it. I just wanted to learn what I knew I wanted to learn. I wanted
Yeah.
to become a better artist, and I just didn't think that the way that the teachers taught in the classes I went, I wasn't getting that there. They just weren't really concentrating on what I really wanted to do. Anyway, I decided one day, let me go check this school out, the American Academy of Art.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked down the hallway of the school, and I was blown away. I mean, I'm sitting there going, man. And the reason why I was blown away was because the first year students' work at the American Academy of Art looked better than the graduate students' work at the Institute.
Mm.
And I said, man, I got to do what I got to do to get to this school. So, and I was even on a scholarship at the Chicago Institute, but
Mm.
that didn't matter to me because it was just kind of worthless as far as I was concerned. So anyway, I met Mike DeSetnik, who was the illustration teacher. And I showed him my portfolio, and I guess he was so impressed with it, he wanted to show it to the dean of the school. And the dean of the school was Irvin Shapiro, who was a very famous watercolorist at the time. And he was the dean of the American Academy of Art. And he saw my work, and he gave me a free 10-week scholarship to go to the school on Saturdays. And so I took advantage of that. And after doing that, I said to myself, whatever I have to do, I got to try to see if I can get into this school. So I went back home to Atlanta for the summer, and I knew I was not going to come back to the Chicago Institute of Art. And I didn't even reapply or anything. And then I knew someone, right? So I went back to Chicago just to check. I said, am I registered? And they said, no, you're not. And I said, okay, good. And so I left and I went back home to Atlanta, and I was able to enter a competition that if I won, I would get enough money to have a scholarship that would enable me to go to the American Academy of Art. And thank God I won, and I got the money, and I was able to go to the American Academy of Art in Chicago. And I went there for 3 years, and it was one of the best blessings I had ever received. I really learned what I needed to learn. I had a really good art teacher, Mike DeSetnik. One of his goals, I remember as I was going to school, he always talked about he wanted to be a painter. He wanted to be a Western painter. And he became a Western painter, So he lives here in Durango, Colorado and stuff. But no, it was an incredible opportunity. I was like a sponge. I would suck up as much information as I could. I went above and beyond my assignments because I was just so excited to be there and to learn. And I was going to make the most of the time I was in school. I shouldn't tell this, but I guess I'll go ahead and tell it.
Mm-hmm.
I made 2 grades. I always got an A on my artwork, and I always got an F on my artwork. The A was for the quality of art. The F was because I was always late. And the reason why I consciously did that, and the reason why I did it was because of this. I said to myself, when I leave this school, I want to have a portfolio that I could get a job with. And if that means I have to take a little extra time to make sure it's done right, I'll do that because I want to be able to get work from my portfolio. And sure enough, that paid off for me because even though I got an F because I was always late, the fact of the matter is I was able to get jobs off of my original portfolio where all of my fellow students had to redo their portfolio to get a job. And so I made the right choice for me. So
how did you have that insight to know that you had to make it look so good as a kid, as a student, right? I mean, that's pretty insightful that you knew how important that portfolio was.
I don't know. Maybe it was because, you know, growing up, my mom was divorced, and we didn't have a lot and stuff, and I was going to make the most of getting out of that lifestyle and doing what I could for myself. And I guess I just I just had that kind of insight. It was just a blessing. I just knew to do that for myself. And there were other things too. I remember, they would tell you in school that, when you put your portfolio together, make sure um, uh, you don't confuse the art director when you show them your work. You want to have a portfolio that's pretty consistent. Everything looks the same. You don't want to have this look, that look stuff. You want everything to look, consistent and stuff. And I said to myself, well, I get bored and I don't like doing the same style all the time. I said, so I don't care what they say. I'm going to do what I want to do and put in my portfolio. It was never a problem for me or for the art directors. So as long as the work was quality,
Yeah.
that's all that mattered to me. So, yeah.
I would think it would be, honestly, now again, it's not my field, but I would think it would be preferable to be able to go, okay, look at this guy's range, because you don't know what the art director may be wanting, and if he doesn't see the whole range, I think is a disadvantage for you just to have the one.
I agree with you. So, but that's the way they were letting you know. But I was always somebody, when somebody told me this is a rule, I would follow them most of the time, but sometimes I would just say, yeah, well, does it always have to be this way? And then later on, I would meet other artists who would break rules all the time, and I'm like, wow, well, they get away with it, and it looks pretty good. So, so I didn't really worry too much about it. I just tried to do the best I could and bring quality to my work, and let that be the hallmark of what I did. So.
And you graduate about 76 or 77 in that time frame?
Yeah, I remember I graduated in '77 because we had a party on the rooftop of a building in Chicago, downtown Chicago, and I called it Jam '77. So I remember I graduated in '77. Yeah, I got recruited by Hallmark Cards, and at first I didn't really want to work for a place like Hallmark, but after they recruited me, I said, let me go out and just try to see what the world is really like in the business community and stuff. So I said, let me try this out. So I went ahead and took the job. Then again, I guess I was also encouraged to take the job because Mark English. What happened was there was a advertising agency called in a gallery called Jack O'Grady's studio in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a rep for Mark and Bernie Fuchs. Yep. And some other illustrators. We heard, some students at the school heard Mark and Bernie Fuchs were at Jack O'Grady's. And we said, we're going to go there and we're going to meet these guys. Okay. Mm-hmm. So about 5 or 6 of us went on our lunch time, went to Jack O'Grady's to see if we could meet Mark and Bernie. Well, they were out to lunch. So we asked the secretary, can we hang out until they come back? And she said, sure, if you want to look around the gallery, go ahead. So that's what we did. Finally, Mark, Jack O'Grady, and Bernie Fuchs walked in. And we were like, oh, man, we were just so excited to meet him. But we didn't know who was Mark and who was Bernie Fuchs. So they played a joke on us, and Mark pretended to be Bernie Fuchs. Bernie Fuchs pretended to be Mark. And, so after, we were talking a little bit, I said to Mark, I said, so what are you doing now? And he said, well, I've got things going on. He said, I'm getting ready to move to Kansas City. I said, you're moving to Kansas City? He said, yeah. I said, for what? He said, I'm going to be working with Hallmark. I said, you're going to be working for Hallmark? And all of my student friends pointed to me and said, he's going to Hallmark. And he said, you are? I said, yeah. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, when you get there, look me up. I said, I'll do that, So that was very encouraging for me, because I said, okay, Mark English is going to be working at Hallmark. So I had a choice to make, because at the same time I had met Ralph Bakshi, the
Oh yeah.
filmmaker who did Fritz the
Fritz the
Cat. Yeah.
Cat, right? Yeah.
Well, he was getting ready to work on a movie with Frank Frazetta, which
Yeah.
became Fire and Ice.
Yep.
And I met him, and he invited me to become one of his artists working on the movie Fire and Ice with Frank Frazetta. Now, come on, Frank Frazetta, are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's
And I said,
unbelievable.
whoa. Yeah. So I said, okay, I had a choice now. Is it going to be Hallmark or is it going to be working for Ralph Bakshi? And that was a really, really hard decision to make because
I
they were
bet.
both perfect opportunities. So kept thinking about it, kept thinking about it. Then I finally said, because I always wanted to move to LA anyway, because I wanted to get into special effects. So I said, I called up Ralph Bakshi and I said, look, I'm going to ask you a question. I said, if I decided to go and work for Hallmark for 1 year, would you allow me after 1 year to come and work for you after that? And he was like, well, if that's what you want to do, I guess I would. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And then I knew, okay, I'm going to go to Hallmark. And that's how I made the decision. After going to Hallmark, and Mark was teaching this class to all of the art employees there and stuff. And I wanted to get in that class so bad, but it was a 3-month waiting list. So I had to wait 3 months before I could even get into the class. So I was really discouraged and stuff. And I kept saying to myself, did I make the right decision?
I bet.
Finally got into Mark's class, and I talked him into doing a demonstration because he didn't want to do it. But I talked him into it, and he finally agreed he would do a demonstration. And I knew within myself, I knew if I saw him do that demonstration, I knew I could duplicate his look. And so he did. He did his demonstration. And, I was like, I knew then I had made the right choice. I knew then. I said, okay, this was the reason why I came to Hallmark. Mm. So I went home and tried to duplicate his technique. I messed up, and I brought it in to him, and I showed him what I was trying to do. I said, what did I do? How did I mess up? And he told me what I did wrong. I went back and redid the thing. And a week and a half to 2 weeks later, I came back with the finished piece of art. And I think we had a whole month to get a piece of art done, but I got it done in just a couple of weeks. So he was sitting in the classroom, and and I said, well, you want to see my work? He said, what do you mean? What work? I said, the work we're doing for the class. He said, you're done already? I said, yeah. And he said, okay, let me see it. So I brought it up to him, and he looked at it, and I went back to my chair, and he looked at it, and he looked at it, and he looked at it. Then he looked up at me. Then he said, what did you say your name was again? And I told him my name, and then he looked back and he said, very nice, very nice. And then he just kept looking at it. And then everybody was like, well, can we see it? And he said, yeah, sure. And then he passed it around for the whole class to see it. And he just kept saying, very nice, very nice. Then when it got to the last person, he said, let me see it again. And they brought it back up to him, and he just kept looking at it and said, so after that, I guess he liked it. And so I was happy about that. And then after that, I was so encouraged that I went ahead and did another illustration. So I did 2 illustrations for that class and stuff. And so after a week after I had showed him the first illustration, he called me into his office and said, would you consider becoming my apprentice?
Wow. And
I was like, man, that was probably one of the most joyous days of my life.
I bet.
Being Mark English's apprentice. I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest with you, Mark, that was probably one of the highlights of my career. To this day, I still think about all of the things I learned from him and all the stuff he taught me, and how my understanding of what to do and my skill level just grew leaps and bounds because of the stuff he was showing me and teaching. He taught me about how to change your look. Taught me about what your worth was, how to know what your worth was. All things about the business, all things about you as a person and you as an artist, and all these different techniques and stuff. And just an incredibly talented man. And just so thankful that I had that opportunity. So,
Well, you know what? But you made that opportunity because you gave up this big opportunity on the other end with Ralph Bakshi and Frank Frazetta for Fire and Ice. Those guys are huge, you
yeah.
know. And Fritz the Cat, which I remember because I couldn't get into the movie, they with an X, they wouldn't let me in, and I did want to see that cartoon. But you gave that up, which, you know, from an ego standpoint, there's a lot of, yes, I could have been with those guys. I could have been in Hollywood, LA, doing this whole movie thing.
Yeah.
But somehow deep inside, you knew the right thing for you as a person and as a career was to work with this individual who is, you know, a leader in the field of illustration. So you took it. You turned down the thing that I think most people would have probably gone in. They probably would have said, yeah, I want to go do the movie. And you didn't. So, you know, to me, you made the decision, you know, from a career standpoint versus an ego standpoint.
Well, like I said, it was one of the most remarkable times of my career. And then once that happened, I had two jobs. I would work for Hallmark in the daytime,
Mm,
and then at night I'd go and work for Mark English.
mm.
And sometimes, that means I'd go over there around 8 o'clock at night, and we wouldn't be finished until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, God.
And sometimes I would have to call in to Hallmark and pretend I was sick or something because I just,
Yeah.
I couldn't go in like that. And but this is what was going on while I was working at Hallmark, and and that habit of working late at night is something that I still haven't been able to shake because of what I did when I was working with Mark and stuff. So that's what happened at Hallmark. I was there at Hallmark for 1 year. I left a year later on the same date. A year later, I told him I was going to do that, and I did. And I went to California.
Yeah.
My goal was to move out to California because I wanted to get into special effects, and that's what I really want to do. I wanted to do movies, and I wanted to do three-dimensional animation like Ray Harryhausen. That was my goal. And so I moved out to California, and that was rough. My first year in California was a real rough year. A lot of stuff happened there, and it didn't go the way I had planned. I always wanted to work for Disney. I had the opportunity to work for Disney. And when I got the opportunity to work for them, I was in a room with all of the old Disney animators.
Wow.
And they wanted me to work at Disney. They really wanted me. And I asked them one question after they saw my work. I said, if I work for you on weekends and on my own time, can I do freelance? And they said no. And I said, well, if that's the case, I'm going to have to turn you down. And they were disappointed. They were like, really? And I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I like my freedom. And I just couldn't understand why, if it's on my own time, why couldn't I do what I want to do on my own time? I mean, that didn't make sense to me. But I had a friend of mine, my roommate, who was a good friend of mine, and we both came from Atlanta, moved out to California. He had always wanted to get in and show his portfolio with Disney, but he never had the opportunity. So I took his portfolio with me.
Mm.
And I just said, well, look, since I'm here, I got a friend's work. Would you look at it and tell me if you think, you would consider bringing them onto your company? They said, well, yeah, let's take a look at it. They took a look at it. He said, you tell your friend he's got a job Monday.
Wow.
And I said, really? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, cool. So I went back to my friend. I said, okay, you're working at Disney now, man. And he was so excited. Years later, just to show you how things work, years later, he became the background director for the movie, The Little Mermaid.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
But anyway,
Well, that could have
I went.
been, that could have been your route too, and again, you make this choice of freedom, which allows you to be where you are and who you are now. But that's a hard choice to give up
Yeah.
Disney. Disney's big.
Well, there was one more choice that I had to turn away from, and it was probably the biggest regret of my career.
Hmm.
Um, and that was when what happened was I moved to I went back home to Atlanta. That right after I had that meeting with Disney, it was in December. So I was able to get a plane ticket, go back home to Atlanta to visit, and I was going to be there for about 3 weeks. I was there for about a couple of weeks, and I get a call from Mark English. And that time in LA was probably one of the worst times I had ever had.
Hmm.
And when Mark said, Thomas, look, man, I just got an opportunity from the Miller Brewing Company, and I need somebody like you to help me out. If you can't help me, I can't do the job. Listen, I'd pay you $4,000 and I'll give you a plane ticket to come up to Kansas City. Would you do it? I said, where's the ticket? And so that changed everything, because if I would have gone back to LA, who knows? I might have taken a different path.
Yeah.
So I went back to Mark English and I became his full-time apprentice and lived in his house for 3 months. And it was a really cool time and stuff. And then after we had finished the project with Miller, um, I got approached by an agency in Kansas City, Missouri called Godbold Richter, and I became their head illustrator. I didn't want to work for them because I was Mark English's apprentice. I didn't need to work for them, right? And they kept saying, well, Thomas, how much would you want if you did work for us? And I said, I don't want to work for you guys. They took me out to lunch. And they said, well, but if you did work for us, how much would you want? And at the time, I just threw a number out there because I knew they weren't going to give it to me. And I just said, okay, I want $30,000. And at that time, that was big money.
Yeah.
And they said, $30,000. I said, yeah. They said, okay. I said, what do you mean, okay? They said, okay, we'll pay you $30,000 if you come to work with us. I said, you kidding me, right? They said, no. And so I became I left Mark's house. I got my own apartment, and I became the head illustrator for this agency for 2 years. And then after that, I went freelance, and I was freelance for 14 years.
Mm.
Um,
What did you take away from that 2 years running that art department?
well, I learned a lot about what it was like to be the head illustrator of a advertising agency, and the scheduling. Took time to learn different techniques. That was a time in my life where I started learning how to dissect other illustrators' techniques so that I could learn more about it. Because, see, I never thought I would get famous off of my look, because I thought my look was too boring. So I would, try to look like Bernie Fuchs. I try to look like Bob Heindel. I try to look like Mark English. Well, I was always already as an apprentice, so
Right.
that wasn't hard. So so I tried to learn as much as I could from everybody, and learn techniques. So during that time, when I would have free time at the agency, I would work on other projects to learn how to break and dissect techniques. And I had no idea how valuable that would be in my career, So,
That was really important. That job really was quite important into your illustration world and what you would do from that point on, because
I had never, until you asked me that question, you just asked me, I had never thought about it like that, but I guess you're right. So yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, eventually after I become a freelance illustrator, I want to move to LA. And what happened was I wanted to work for ILM because I wanted to do special effects. That was my dream. That was a goal. So I was able to get a contact at ILM, and I got the number to Phil Tippett. uh, Mr. Special Effects himself.
Hmm.
And I got a meeting with Phil, and I showed him my portfolio and showed him my sculptures and everything. And he said, Thomas, you're really got an incredible portfolio, and we would love to have you in here. He said, but we just finished the last Star Wars movie. They had just finished Return of the Jedi. He said, we don't have anything big going on right now. And he said, but I'll tell you what, if you really want to do this, um, the next big thing that comes around, you will be at the top of the list. And I said, okay, well, in that case, while I'm waiting, I'll take on work, to support myself until you call me. So that's what I did. And I was able to start doing movie poster artwork, which is something I really wanted to do, was movie poster artwork. I don't know why I wanted to do that, because at the time, Drew Struzan was the king and
Yeah.
nobody was going to beat him. I mean, he was the top dog and
Right.
everybody was chasing him at the time, including me. And because I want to do stuff like Drew Struzan, I want to do this, I want to do this. After I started doing the movie poster work and really getting into it, I realized it wasn't the way I thought it was going to be. And I didn't get as much joy out of doing it because of the deadlines and stuff as I thought I would. But anyway, that's what I was doing at the time. And I had so much work that when Phil Tippett called me and said, okay, Thomas, we need you, I had to tell him, I'm sorry, I can't do it, because I had all this other work that I had agreed to do. And when I finally left LA, that was the number one regret I had, was I didn't do what I came out here to
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
And when you turned him down, what was the movie that he was going to have you work on for the
I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember what the movie was. I just know that he kept his promise to me, and when something came through, he called me up. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So when you turned it down, do you think you turned it down for a couple reasons? One, you had commitments and you had to keep those commitments. Was that one of the
Well,
reasons?
the main thing was this: I had a rep in LA who I started working with, who was one of the top reps in LA. Her name was France Eileen, and she was really well known in LA. And eventually, became one of her top artists, and so she had already done all this stuff for me and got me all this work, and I just didn't think it was right for me to, even though I really wanted to do the other thing, I was already right in the middle of commitments, and I wouldn't want to just leave her hanging like that. So I couldn't do it.
Yeah, we call that loyalty. Is what
Yeah, well,
that is what that is.
yeah,
Get
yeah,
it? Yeah. So, but you did. Yeah. So that was a big regret,
yeah,
but it is also your path that you
yeah,
took.
yeah.
So,
It's the path I took, and I think about it sometimes, because I realize, had I gone ahead and done what I did with Phil Tippett, my career would be probably so different right now. I'd be in a whole nother direction. I'd be in the movie industry. I'd be, all of that kind of stuff. It's just, and the reason why I wanted to learn it, I didn't really want to have a really big career in the movie industry. I just wanted to learn how to do it for me,
mm,
because I like doing stuff like that on my own. So that's really why I wanted to do it,
yeah, it fit your
right? And learn.
personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And it allowed you creativity on just like when that portfolio, you go, no, I'm not just doing this. I'm doing the whole wide range. I think
yeah,
it probably was the same kind of thing. You saw ability, you could do all different kinds of, movies, different types of imagery, and it appealed to the essence probably of who you are.
yeah. But like I said, I've always been into miniatures. People who do those miniature cities and houses and stuff,
Yeah.
and creating a little world. I've always been into that stuff ever since I was a kid. So, and then bringing a foam rubber model to life on film, I mean, you can't get any better than that, So, and King Kong and all of that stuff, I was just,
Uh-huh.
I loved all that stuff. So, yeah.
And so when you leave there, so you turn down that job, you're doing movie posters, but that probably doesn't last because you got to compete with the king of movie posters. What happens then?
I even let Drew know. Drew was probably one of the best things that happened to me at that time, and I let him know that. because I couldn't I couldn't top Drew and I couldn't beat Drew. He was too quick and too good at what he did. And when I came to that realization, I said to myself, why am I following somebody that I will never be able to overtake? You know, he will always be the king here with this particular genre. And I said, I need to find what I can do for me and move on. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm done with this. Let me move on and find who I am and what I can do with what I do. And that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And after I did that, I was still illustrating for a while, but it had gotten to a point where I was at the top of my game and all of that, making all that money, but it wasn't satisfying me. I was burnt out and I hated the scheduling and how art directors would throw you a job and go on some kind of vacation over the weekend and here you had to work all the time and they didn't care one way or the other, you know. And I never will forget when I chose to leave illustration. I was working on a job for Miller. No, not Miller, Budweiser. And the client said, you know, we really want you to get this done on time because we had a problem with the last time we worked with this company and we don't want to mess up again. And I said, no, I understand that. So I was working on this job and trying to get it done. I was probably a week out from being finished. And so all of a sudden I get a call to let me know that my father died. Mm. And I had to go to his funeral. And he lived in Atlanta, and I was living in California at the time. I called up the art director. I said, look, man, I know you needed this by a certain time, but look, something just happened, and I got to do this. I said, my father just died. I got to go to his funeral. And he was like, well, can't you just do this for us? And can't you do this? I said, look, man, I got it. He said, but Thomas, I understand what's going on in this hard time, but we really needed this. Can you do it? And I was like, oh, okay. And I was just really upset. I said, all right, I'll do it. I got off that phone. I got mad. And I just said, doggone it, no. I called him back. I said, I'm going to my father's funeral. You will get this when I get back. Goodbye. You know, and that was it. I go to his funeral. And I come back. I get the illustration done, you know, a few days late or whatever. I get it to him, you know, everything goes through. Okay. Well, that was the only job I had done that month. So I really needed that job because I was behind on bills. I needed the payment on that job. Waited 30 days. And after 30 days, they hadn't sent me the check. Mm. So I called them up and I said, you know, it's been 30 days now. Where's my check? They said, well, Thomas, we're sorry, we can't do anything. The owner of the company, he's the only one who signs the checks and he's not here. He's on a vacation. I said, but can't you call him or something to get him to, you know, do something? I need this money. He says, no, there's nothing we can do until he gets back. So, you know, I kind of get a little upset and there's nothing I can do. And then I wait a few days. I call him back. Look, you know, I'm really struggling here. Can't you do something? Could you call? No, I'm sorry, we can't do that, Thomas. We just can't do it. I said, well, why not? I said, I need the money. Can't you do something for me? No, we can't. He's in such and such city. He went there to his friend's funeral. I said to myself, he went to his friend's funeral. I said, okay. I hung up that phone. I said, I'm done. This is it. No more. I'm done. And that was it. I drew the line. I said, no more. I'm walking away from illustration. Mm. And I did. I walked away from illustration. And then the next thing that came my way was I got into the collectible industry. And I had no idea what that was about. All I know is I went to a convention and I was blown away when I see these artists who do plates, dolls, you know, prints and cards, collectible cards and all that kind of stuff. and all kind of collectible stuff that you can imagine from all over the world. And some of these artists were millionaires off of this junk.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe people are millionaires off of junk, these plates and I'm like, I can do this. I can do this, you know. and and I remember I was so excited, and I came back preaching the gospel of collectibles to all of my artist friends and trying to get them to understand, man, you don't understand. You can make big money doing nothing. This junk, and stuff. And nobody would listen to me. Nobody, they just looked at me cross-eyed and said, huh? And I said, man, you got to get into this thing. And they like, huh? And nobody took my advice. And so I just kept doing it. And I became a well-known a plate collector, a plate artist. And all my stuff were #1 sellers and stuff. And then that's what really drew me into the collectible industry. And
you did Star Trek, right? And some of the big movies.
Oh yeah, I did the first
and stuff.
Well, that's how it all started. What happened was I did the first Star Trek collector's plate for Lucasfilm. And Lucasfilm was I was living in Marin County, and they were in Marin County, so I would do work for them all the time. So they called me and said, we want you to do our collector's plate. I said, cool. I knew nothing about it. I just knew to do the work. So we did it with a company called the Hamilton Group, and they were really big, a collectible plate company. So after I had done the last plate, which was the commemorative plate, which I designed and created myself, I realized, I said, man, I should have gotten a royalty on this. So I called up the art director. Is there any way on this plate I could get a royalty? He said, no, Thomas, you signed the contract. Lucas has got this all locked up. This is his. There's nothing you can do. I said, all right, at least I tried, And I was really discouraged. And a few weeks later, I was so discouraged. I really went into prayer, and I asked God to give me a blessing. I said I wanted a royalty. And a couple of weeks later, I get a call from the Hamilton Group. Thomas, we love the work you did on the Star Wars plate, but we've got a new job for you. We want you to do the Wizard of Oz collector's plates, and you'll get a royalty. And I said, oh man, I can't believe you're telling me this. They said, well, why? I said, I can't do it. They said, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, I've been working too hard, and I had a big argument with my wife, and she wanted me to stop working for a while, and I promised her I would. And now you're coming up with this, I can't take the job. And she said, Thomas, please think about it, because this could be really do it, and we'll give you a royalty. I said, you will? And they said, yeah. And I said, oh, I don't know. I said, I'll let you know. So I go to my wife, and I just said, look, I know I told you I wasn't going to do this, but I'm just going to tell you what's going on. I said, they offered me this job to do the Wizard of Oz plate series, and they're going to give me a royalty. She looked at me, she said, take the job. I said, good. And so that's how I started got into the collectible industry. And from that point on, everything I did, I got a royalty on. And I had 5 different streams of royalties coming to me. I was doing at the same time, I was doing collector's plates. I was also doing prints and posters.